Monks, murder and mountains. Join me as I stay local and walk some of the sights of South Wales. Well, hello and welcome. For today's adventure, I'm walking the countryside in Margam near Port Talbot. It's not going to be a long walk, but it does get steep in places. Very steep, I think. Although lockdown has eased in Wales, it's still much stricter than England, and we're advised not to drive, so we're staying locally, and in fact, I cycled here today. So it's monks, murder and mountains. Well, actually, they're big hills more than mountains, but that would spoil the alliteration. Well, we're starting today's walk at Margam Abbey, a Cistercian abbey which was founded in 1147. In its time, it was the largest and wealthiest in Wales. So this is Margam Abbey Parish Church. Just over the wall is Margam Park, where you can find the old chapter house. This is where they used to store many important books and documents, including ancient poetry and manuscripts, and it also used to hold a copy of the Domesday Book, and that copy can now be found in the British Library. In 1349, the Black Death hit Margam, and the number of brothers in the monastery dwindled dramatically, and by 1536, the dissolution of the monastery, only 9 monks remained. Because of the continued lockdown, Margam Park is still closed, but if we go around the side of the church, we can see over the wall and we can see the remains of the chapter house, and also I've got photographs from a previous visit I'll stick in here. By the 18th century, most of the church was in ruins, but during the 19th century, it was extensively restored. But inside, you can still find the original 12th century nave from the abbey, and this still makes up an integral part of the church. Unfortunately, because of the current situation, we can't go inside the church, but when you visit, definitely go in and take a look. So, to the murder. Robert Scott was a gamekeeper for the Talbot family on the Margam estate, and on Friday the 10th of June 1898 his body was found. He'd been shot in the face. A poacher, Joseph Lewis, aged 32, was arrested for the crime and subsequently found guilty. He was hanged in Swansea Jail on the 30th of August 1898. Apparently, the ghost of Robert Scott has been seen in Margam Castle, ascending the central Gothic staircase. I like a good ghost story. Personally, I think it's all a load of rubbish, but I still like a good ghost story. Robert Scott is buried in Margam Abbey graveyard. Apparently, it's on the north side of the church, and it's a cross. So let's go and see if we can find it. So I did manage to find the grave of Robert Scott. It's in the northeast corner of Margam Abbey graveyard, and it's a cross, and it's got a distinctive ring of thorns around it and a metal railing around the grave itself. So here's the inscription. It's my dear husband Robert Scott of Margam, who died June the 9th, 1898, aged 39 years. Long before the establishment of the monastery, Wales was already a Christian country. By the 6th century, most of Wales was already Christian. In the area, many inscribed stones were found, dating from this time, as well as later Celtic crosses from the 9th and 10th century. Next to the abbey, you can find Margam Stones Museum, which obviously at the moment is closed, but when things get back to normal, definitely worth a visit. That's Margam Stones Museum, just next door to Margam Abbey. So we're leaving Margam Abbey behind us and we're walking west down a country lane, and we're going to join a footpath which will lead us to a stone circle. More about that coming up. I think it's time for a bit of footage of me wistfully walking down a country lane. I'm being wistful. Well, not far from Margam Abbey, you'll find this stone circle. And as a visitor, you may be asking, what's this ancient stone circle? Is it from back in the ancient days of the Celts, back from the midst of time? Well, actually, it's probably back from 1932. And the Eisteddfod, the national Eisteddfod of Wales, which was held in Port Talbot, I think in Margam Park, back in the 30s. For those that don't know, the Eisteddfod is a celebration and a competition of Welsh culture, music and poetry, and as part of the ceremony they create a stone circle which they leave at each site they visit around Wales, and this is the one from that event. So the next part of a walk is one of the steepest, and we're heading up the hill to an old 15th century church which has got a number of names. Cadw, the Welsh governing body for ancient sites, call it Hen Eglwys, and I think I also saw it called Hen Eglwys on the Ordnance Survey map. That simply means old church. The locals call it Capel Mair, or Capel Mair Arabrin, means St Mary's Church on the hill. But I've also seen it referred to as Cryke Church, Cryke, C-R-Y-K-E, and I think it comes from the ancient Celtic or Breton word for crag, Cryke, crag, and Craig in Welsh, which could refer, or probably refers to its position on a rocky outcrop overlooking Margam. So if you do know exactly where the name comes from, let me know, put it in the comments below. But the most common names for it are Capel Mair or Hen Eglwys. I'm heavy breathing at the best of times these days, let alone doing this really steep walk. So we've made it up the hill, and this is Hen Eglwys, or Capel Mair. It was built around 1470 by the monks for the local people, the peasants and the yeomen, who weren't allowed to pray in the abbey church down by the monastery that was reserved just for the monks. So this is the west side, and this is the west door, and above it you can see the west window. Apparently there's some discussion whether this was brought in. It doesn't fit that well with the church itself. So there's some discussion. It may have been brought up from the abbey below and fitted. So it may be slightly older than the rest of the church. So this is the east window, and this was definitely built when the church was built back in the 1500s. It's got the distinctive perpendicular style of the window. You can see it in the tracery above. So we're now inside the church, on the south side here, near where the altar would have stood. You can see this inlet. I think it was called a piscina. I think it was a basin where they would have washed the communion vessels. And next to it, on the south side, is this big window. Again, I think this was a later addition to the church. So from this position, we've got the medieval world of the monks behind us. Then down there, the Victorian world of Margam Castle and Margam Park, owned by the Talbot family, who created Port Talbot. That leads us on to this view, the industrial side. Port Talbot Steel Works, which is far smaller than the heyday in the 1960s, but still a major and very important employer for the area. And I think it's still one of the largest steel works in Europe. So from medieval times, we're going to continue our walk. We're going up that hill to an Iron Age enclosure that'll take us back at least another 1500 years. So let's get walking. It's amazing to think we're less than a mile away from one of the most heavily industrialised areas of South Wales. Again, we're on the Wales coast path. So we're just about to come up to the top of the hill and Half Moon Camp, the Iron Age enclosure. Carl's been here as well. Hello, Carl. So I've made it to the top of the hill, and this is where Half Moon Camp would have been. It was an Iron Age enclosure dating back to 800 BC, and it was there up until Roman times. Just below me I can see the circle from earlier on today, dating back to 1932. But in contrast to all that, we've got Port Talbot and the steel works, and behind that is Swansea Bay. So according to my map, this is where the Iron Age encampment Half Moon Camp would have been. It's hard to see anything because you can tell it's really overgrown with ferns. I'm walking over sort of there's some trenches and troughs and mounds, but I don't know what's natural and what's man-made. Really need to come up here with an expert. So if you know this area or you're an expert about the Iron Age enclosures around Margam, let me know, put some comments below so we can come and visit. I know there's another fort over there somewhere, but again Margam Park's closed, so I have to come back to investigate that one. So now we're going to head off downhill to our last stop of the day, the Monk's Bath, before we head back down to Margam Abbey. So we're just coming to the Monk's Bath. This was originally associated with Hen Eglwys, the ruined church on the hill, and thought to have been used as a baptistry. But later it was used by and adapted by Margam Abbey and used as a cold bathhouse. Hello. There's some sort of seating around the side. And there's like a bench at the back. So as you can see, we're back at Margam Abbey. 4.5 miles on my watch, but again I went off the paths and I was filming. I think if you're not filming, it's about 3.5 miles, but the paths can be steep in parts. I don't know if you can see on the lens, it's starting to rain as well, so I got the timing right. So just to recap, starting at Margam Abbey, down the road, down the lane to the circular stones, the Eisteddfod stones, then back up the hill to Hen Eglwys, the old church, and back up the hill again to the Iron Age enclosure, then down to the Monk's Bath, then down again back to Margam Abbey and the Stones Museum. So that's another local walk, and apologies again for Mel not being with me. I think she's sending me a message somehow. But anyway, it's not the end. There's plenty more videos to see on our playlist. And one of our favourites was last summer, Route 66. We did the whole trip. So until next time, that's a bye from me and Mel.